It was just another regular flight. The cabin was buzzing with the usual sounds, seatbelt signs clicking on, flight attendants giving their routine safety demonstrations, and passengers settling into their seats. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. That is, until a man in his late 50s wearing a simple jacket and jeans stepped onto the plane. To most, he seemed like any other passenger, blending into the crowd. But unbeknownst to the flight crew, they were about to meet someone they'd never forget. As the plane took off and reached cruising altitude, the crew started their usual routine. But there was one thing that stood out. This man. He was sitting in the aisle seat right in the middle of the flight. His low-key demeanor, a mix of relaxed confidence and quiet mystery, immediately caught the attention of the flight attendants, Flight attendants, including Sarah, an energetic and fun-loving crew member, began chatting among themselves. "I mean, look at this guy. He looks like he just came out of a 90s action movie," Sarah whispered to her colleague Emma as they passed by. "He's definitely trying to look normal, but there's something off about him." Emma grinned. "Yeah, he's got that 'I'm a secret agent who just wants to ride in peace' look. But seriously, who does he think he's fooling?" They couldn't resist. The jokes started flying. The crew began speculating about his life. "Probably some out-of-work actor trying to relive his glory days," Sarah laughed. "Maybe he was in The Matrix or something. You know, one of those action movies from back in the day." The other flight attendants joined in. They hadn't realized it yet, but they were all laughing and chatting about the man, completely unaware of who he truly was. But as the flight went on, the man started to notice the crew's laughter. At first it was just a polite smile, but as the jokes continued, his expression remained neutral. There was no sign of annoyance or anger, just calm acceptance. The crew grew more confident in their playful teasing, unaware that their harmless comments were about to lead to one of the most jaw-dropping moments of their careers. And just when they thought the fun couldn't go any further, they made the mistake of joking about a scenario that would make anyone nervous. What if this guy is actually some undercover spy or secret agent on a top-secret mission? Sarah half-joked, eyeing the man from across the aisle. That was when the first sign of something extraordinary happened. It wasn't the smirk on his face. It wasn't the subtle glint in his eye. It was the way he looked at Sarah when their eyes met. It was different, as though she should have known who he was. And for a split second she thought, "Wait a minute, am I being too hard on him?" But before she could process her thoughts, she turned away. The reality of what was about to unfold was still miles away from her imagination. This was just the beginning. Can you guess who this man really is? What would you do if you realized you were making fun of someone famous? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you can stay tuned for the rest of this incredible story. Keanu Reeves, the man sitting so inconspicuously on the plane, was no ordinary passenger. To the world, he was known for his roles in iconic films like The Matrix, John Wick, and Speed. But on this particular day, he wasn't a Hollywood superstar. He wasn't the subject of tabloid gossip or the focus of a movie premiere. He was just a regular guy, trying to get from one place to another like anyone else. Keanu had always been someone who valued privacy. In an industry where personal lives are constantly on display, he was one of the few stars who managed to keep his life relatively under wraps. Despite his fame, Keanu lived modestly. He wasn't seen at every red carpet event or in the latest paparazzi photos. Instead, he spent his time giving back to the community, quietly donating to charities, helping people in need, and avoiding the limelight when possible. He was the definition of humble. Even though he could easily have basked in the glory of his fame, he had never been a fan of the star lifestyle. His acting career had given him fame, fortune, and recognition, but it hadn't changed his love for the simple things in life. Keanu loved reading, taking long walks and exploring new places. He found comfort in these small, everyday experiences that allowed him to disconnect from the fast-paced world of Hollywood. As a child, Keanu had faced his share of hardships. Raised in Toronto, he was raised by his mother after his father left when he was young. His life had been far from perfect, but Keanu had learned to adapt, developing a deep sense of empathy for those who struggled. He had seen his mother work multiple jobs to support them, and that work ethic had stuck with him. It was these early life lessons that had shaped him into the grounded, thoughtful man he was today. Though Keanu had achieved a level of success few could even dream of, he never let his fame define him. To him, being known wasn't nearly as important as being a good person. And that was exactly why he was sitting there in the aisle seat, wearing a simple jacket, blending in with the other passengers on the flight. As the flight continued, he watched the flight attendants do their rounds, their jokes and chatter a source of mild amusement to him. He had long since learned to laugh off the odd situations he found himself in. He was used to being in the public eye, but it wasn't every day that people didn't recognize him, and this flight was shaping up to be one of those days. Keanu was used to people not recognizing him, but today felt different. There was something oddly refreshing about the anonymity, even if it meant being the subject of harmless jokes from the flight crew. He wasn't offended by their laughter. He was more amused by their imagination. After all, what could be better than blending in and living life like everyone else for a change? But what Keanu didn't expect was just how quickly their harmless fun would turn into a moment of revelation, one that would leave the flight crew utterly speechless. Can you imagine what it's like to be Keanu Reeves, always under the public's gaze? Would you be able to stay so humble if you were in his shoes? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you can keep up with this surprising twist that's about to unfold. As the flight cruised smoothly at 35,000 feet, the jokes about the mysterious passenger continued. Sarah, Emma, and the rest of the crew had fallen into a rhythm, passing by the aisle seat, where Keanu sat without giving him a second glance. They were comfortable now, joking about how he might have been an extra in one of those late-night action films, or maybe he was a former stunt double trying to escape from his old life. The banter was light-hearted and filled with the playful energy that only a long flight could generate, but Sarah, ever the jokester, was the one who pushed the limits the furthest. "I bet he's one of those actors who just doesn't want to be recognized," she whispered to Emma as she walked by Keanu's seat again. "You know, like a B-list celebrity who's pretending to be a normal guy to feel normal." Emma smirked and nodded. "Probably just wants to sit here, drink his coffee, and not deal with any fans. Too bad he's not fooling anyone." The flight attendants chuckled amongst themselves as they continued with their work. But as they exchanged their playful comments, something shifted in the air. Keanu's subtle, quiet presence was suddenly more noticeable than ever. He hadn't reacted at all to their jokes. He'd just sat there, calm and composed, watching them go about their duties. It seemed like he was oblivious to the fact that they were talking about him. But then, just as Sarah walked past him again, she noticed something that made her stop in her tracks. Keanu, who had been staring out of the window just moments before, was now looking directly at her. There was no anger or irritation in his gaze, just a quiet, knowing look that sent a shiver down her spine. For a brief moment, Sarah's heart skipped a beat. Could it be? Could he possibly know what they were saying about him? But instead of confronting her or causing a scene, he gave her a subtle, almost imperceptible smile, a knowing smile that seemed to say, "You don't know who you're dealing with." The unease crept in. Sarah suddenly realized how far they'd gone with their jokes. Her face flushed with embarrassment, and for the first time she started to wonder if they had gone too far. Was this man someone important? Someone famous? Or was she just overthinking things? Emma, noticing the change in Sarah's expression, leaned in. "What's wrong?" she whispered. Sarah swallowed hard. I think he knows what we've been saying." Emma raised an eyebrow, brushing off the concern. "Come on, Sarah, don't be silly. He probably didn't hear us." But the doubt lingered in Sarah's mind, growing stronger with each passing minute. The more she thought about it, the more she felt like there was something off about this whole situation. The man hadn't reacted to any of their teasing, but that look in his eyes, it was like he was waiting for something. As the minutes ticked by, the jokes about the man seemed less amusing and more like an unwelcome game. The crew, still oblivious to who Keanu truly was, began to grow increasingly self-conscious. The atmosphere in the cabin had shifted. The once light-hearted conversation had now turned awkward, as the flight attendants tried to carry on with their duties without drawing attention to their previous remarks. Sarah's nerves were getting the best of her. She couldn't shake the feeling that something significant was about to happen. She glanced over at Keanu once again, only to find him still staring back at her, his eyes calm, patient, as if he knew the entire flight crew was now on edge. And just when Sarah thought she could no longer take the suspense, it happened. One of the senior flight attendants, Greg, who had been in the business for years, approached Sarah quietly. "Hey, Sarah," Greg said, his voice low and steady. "Did you happen to notice anything unusual about our friend in 7B? Sarah blinked, her pulse racing. "What do you mean?" Greg glanced around, making sure no one else was close. "I don't know. He looks really familiar, like maybe I've seen him in a movie or something. You ever get that feeling?" His eyes flickered nervously toward Keanu. Sarah's heart sank. The realization hit her like a ton of bricks. "Oh no, not him." "Don't be ridiculous," Sarah said, trying to brush it off, but the unease had already taken root. "We're just overthinking it." But in the pit of her stomach, she couldn't ignore the growing sense that something was off. Her gut told her that this wasn't just any ordinary passenger, and just when she was about to dismiss it completely, a sudden noise echoed from the front of the plane. A loud and unmistakable voice. "Excuse me, but is this the flight to LA?" A deep voice called out from the cockpit area. It was Keanu's voice, and there was no mistaking it. The whole crew froze. Keanu stood up from his seat, a calm smile still on his face. He reached up to adjust his jacket, and as he did, his sleeve subtly pulled back, revealing a tattoo on his wrist, a tattoo that many would recognize instantly. The crew's jaws dropped as they finally put two and two together. "Wait, is that?" Emma whispered, her face pale with realization. "Keanu Reeves," Greg muttered under his breath, wide-eyed. The atmosphere in the cabin shifted dramatically, and the crew could no longer hide their shock. Sarah's face turned beet red, and she tried to force a smile, but it was clear the realization had hit everyone like a freight train. They had been joking about none other than Keanu Reeves, the very man they had been making fun of. Can you imagine what it feels like to realize you've been making fun of a celebrity without even knowing it? Have you ever had a moment like this? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you can see how this wild story unfolds. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. The moment Keanu stood up, the entire flight crew was paralyzed with shock. They stared at him, unable to believe what was happening. Sarah's heart was racing in her chest, and her mind was scrambling to find a way out of this mess. She couldn't help but replay all of the jokes she had made, every word, every laugh, and it was all coming back to her in vivid detail. How could she have been so oblivious? Keanu seemed completely unfazed by their wide-eyed stares. He didn't seem angry or upset, just calm and composed as ever. He smiled politely at Greg, who was still in stunned silence. "Yes, this is the flight to LA, Keanu said, his voice smooth and calm. "Thank you." For a moment, the plane felt too small. The laughter and chatter that had filled the cabin just moments earlier had been replaced with a thick, suffocating silence. Everyone was waiting for something, anything that would help them process what had just happened. Then Keanu did something that no one could have predicted. Instead of storming off or confronting the crew about their mocking comments, he calmly made his way to the front of the plane, as if nothing had changed. Sarah couldn't tear her eyes away from him as he passed, still in a quiet state of shock. But then Keanu did something that completely disarmed her. He turned around halfway down the aisle, his face still holding that quiet, almost mischievous smile. "Hey," he said, his voice just loud enough for everyone to hear. "If you're going to make fun of me, you better make sure I don't hear it next time." The entire cabin erupted into nervous laughter, a mix of awkward chuckles and sighs of relief. Sarah's face was burning with embarrassment. But Keanu wasn't done. "Just kidding," he added, his grin widening. "You all are doing a great job. I'm just happy to be here and get to experience what it's like to be a normal guy for a bit." The tension lifted in an instant. It was as if a weight had been lifted from the shoulders of every crew member. Keanu's ability to turn the moment into something light-hearted was nothing short of incredible. Sarah, who had been standing there, frozen, now found her voice. She took a deep breath, mustering all of her courage. "Mr. Reeves, I'm so sorry for what we said. It was just a joke. We didn't mean to—" Keanu raised his hand, cutting her off with a smile. "No need to apologize. I've heard worse from the press," he said with a wink which immediately put Sarah at ease. "How you were just having some fun, I get it." The rest of the crew exhaled collectively, a sense of relief washing over them. Keanu, in his infinite grace, had completely diffused the tension, but the crew was still left to deal with the aftermath of their embarrassing blunder. There was a mixture of guilt and amusement as they exchanged glances. Sarah, especially, felt both embarrassed and deeply grateful for Keanu's calm demeanor. "Well, I guess we should have known, huh?" Emma said. Her voice tinged with a bit of nervous laughter. "I mean, who else would be so chill about it? Only Keanu could pull that off." Sarah nodded, still feeling the heat in her cheeks. "Yeah, I didn't even recognize him. I feel like such an idiot." As the flight continued, the crew resumed their duties, but the atmosphere had shifted. There was a new level of respect in the air, not just for Keanu as a celebrity, but for the way he handled the situation with grace. It was a lesson, really. A reminder that fame didn't change a person's humanity, that no matter how famous or successful someone was, they were still just people who could laugh at themselves. And yet, despite the awkwardness of the moment, Sarah couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. She had just witnessed one of the most famous actors in the world, a man known for his roles in some of the most iconic movies of all time, handle a potentially embarrassing situation with the utmost humility and humor. It was a side of Keanu Reeves that very few people had seen, and now Sarah and the crew would forever carry that image with them. The man who was the subject of their jokes had become a living example of kindness and grace under pressure. But just when Sarah thought the encounter was over, Keanu's voice rang out again, this time over the intercom. "Hey, this is Keanu," he said, his voice light and friendly. "I just wanted to let you all know that this is one of the best flights I've ever had. So thank you for making it a memorable experience. And, no hard feelings about the jokes, okay?" The crew's eyes widened in disbelief. They all burst into a mixture of laughter and relief. This time it wasn't just polite laughter, it was genuine, heartfelt laughter. Keanu had turned what could have been an embarrassing situation into one of the most memorable moments of their careers. What would you do if you were in the crew's shoes? Can you imagine the awkwardness? Let us know how you'd handle the situation in the comments below. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button, because you won't want to miss what happens next. Trust me, this story is far from over. The rest of the flight passed in an almost surreal haze for the crew. They went through the motions, attending to the passengers, making small talk. But the atmosphere had shifted. The earlier tension had dissolved into a mixture of disbelief, gratitude, and amusement. Everyone was still processing what had just happened. Keanu Reeves had walked onto this plane as a stranger, a subject of jokes and playful mockery, but by the time they reached cruising altitude, he had become something far greater, a symbol of humility, grace, and human kindness. As the crew finished their rounds and began preparing for the descent, Sarah found herself in the galley, trying to wrap her mind around the events. She had been joking about the man, mocking his inconspicuousness, yet he had turned out to be none other than one of the most beloved and recognizable actors in the world. But it wasn't his fame that kept lingering in her thoughts. It was the way he handled the whole situation. Sarah leaned against the counter, her fingers absent-mindedly playing with a coffee stirrer. She couldn't stop thinking about how easily Keanu had let them off the hook. She had expected anger, annoyance, or worse, a public confrontation. Instead, he had done what he did best. He had been calm, composed, and generous. "Sarah, are you okay?" Emma's voice interrupted her thoughts, pulling her back to reality. She looked up to see Emma standing in the doorway, a concerned look on her face. Sarah gave a small, weary smile. I don't know what to think anymore," she admitted. "I feel so stupid. I mean, who makes fun of Keanu Reeves and doesn't even realize it? What if he really was offended?" Emma shook her head. "You're overthinking it. He didn't seem bothered at all. In fact, I think he was just happy to have a little laugh at the situation. That's what makes him different. He doesn't take himself too seriously." Sarah sighed, leaning her head back against the galley wall. "I just can't believe how cool he was about it. I mean, we totally deserve to be embarrassed. But he just let it go like it was nothing." Emma's eyes softened as she joined Sarah by the counter. That's the thing about Keanu. People forget that he's human. He's not just an action star or a Hollywood icon. He's a real person who's been through a lot and hasn't let any of it change him. And that's probably why he handled it so well. Sarah paused, considering Emma's words. It wasn't just Keanu's acting roles that made him stand out. It was the way he lived his life. Quietly, humbly, with a genuine kindness that radiated from him, even when no one was watching. In a world where celebrities often lived their lives for the spotlight, Keanu had built a reputation for staying grounded, for being the guy who didn't need to flaunt his fame. That thought struck Sarah like a bolt of lightning. She had been so caught up in the jokes, in the small harmless fun they'd had at his expense, that she hadn't taken a moment to really see him. Keanu wasn't just a character on a screen. He was a person, and that person had shown her something that few people ever would: the power of humility. Suddenly, a voice over the intercom broke her reverie. "Attention, all passengers. We are beginning our descent into LA. I hope you've enjoyed the flight as much as I have." Keanu's voice rang out once more. "I just want to say thank you to the crew for making this such an unforgettable journey. I think I'll remember this one for a while." The passengers stirred, their murmurs of surprise and excitement mixing with the steady hum of the airplane's engines. Keanu had made it clear that this flight had been as significant to him as it had been to them. Sarah smiled softly, the last of her embarrassment fading away. Keanu didn't just make them laugh, he had opened their eyes to something deeper. It wasn't the jokes or the laughter that mattered, it was how they all carried themselves in the face of a shared, vulnerable moment. He had made them see that even in awkward situations, there was room for grace, for kindness, and for laughter. They began their descent into Los Angeles. Sarah found herself looking out the small window of the galley, her mind filled with a strange sense of peace. She had just experienced something incredible, something that had started with a joke and had ended with a lesson in humility, respect, and the true nature of kindness. But there was one last thing that still lingered in her mind. As the plane neared the runway, Sarah couldn't resist looking down the aisle to catch one last glimpse of Keanu. There he was, sitting calmly in his seat, his arms crossed and his gaze once again directed out of the window, completely at ease. But this time, instead of the confusion and awkwardness that had earlier filled the cabin, there was a new understanding. Keanu Reeves wasn't just the man they had unknowingly mocked. He wasn't just the quiet, humble passenger who had let them off the hook. He was a reminder of the power of kindness, the importance of staying grounded, and the ability to laugh at ourselves. And that was something none of them would ever forget. Have you ever been in a situation like this? A time when someone's grace and kindness completely changed how you saw them? Let us know in the comments below. How would you have handled it? If you enjoyed this chapter, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you can be part of the rest of the journey. Trust me, there's more to this story that you won't want to miss. As the plane touched down in Los Angeles, the energy in the cabin had shifted completely. What had begun as an ordinary flight, full of innocent banter and mild curiosity, had transformed into a deeply memorable experience for everyone involved. For the crew, the passengers, and even Keanu himself, the journey was far more than just a routine trip. It had become a chance to learn something unexpected about humanity: kindness and self-awareness. Sarah stood by the galley door as the plane taxied toward the gate. She watched as Keanu sat quietly in his seat, still unassuming, still at ease, as if he hadn't just caused a ripple of reflection in the hearts of everyone on board. It was surreal to think that they had all been so wrong about him, had assumed he was just another celebrity trying to blend in, when in reality he was someone who carried himself with a quiet dignity, even in the face of awkwardness. The crew, now finished with their duties, began to congregate near the front of the plane. Sarah couldn't help but feel a deep sense of gratitude for how Keanu had handled the entire situation. No one would have blamed him if he had been offended, if he had called them out, or worse, if he had simply made their jobs uncomfortable for the rest of the flight. But instead, he had used the situation to teach them something invaluable. "I can't believe how calm he was about all of it," Greg, the senior flight attendant, said as he joined Sarah by the door. I've been in this business for years, and I've never seen a celebrity take it that well. Most people would have made a scene. Sarah nodded, her eyes still fixed on Keanu, who was now gathering his things, preparing to disembark. Yeah, it was like he wasn't bothered at all. He didn't even make us feel guilty for the jokes. Emma joined them, her arms crossed, a thoughtful expression on her face. It's more than just that, it's how he handled the entire thing. He didn't lash out, he didn't even try to make us feel bad. He just let it go. And that was what made the difference. The group stood in silence for a moment, reflecting on the lesson they'd just learned. In a way, Keanu had taken them on a journey of their own. He had shown them that kindness wasn't about being perfect or having the best reputation. It was about how you handled the little things, the small moments where you had the choice to either react with anger or to simply laugh, to move on with grace. I think we could all learn something from him, Sarah said quietly, a new sense of clarity washing over her. Sometimes we get so caught up in the moment, in the fun of making jokes, that we forget to think about the person we're joking about. He reminded me that everyone, no matter how famous they are, deserves respect and kindness. Greg smiled at her, clearly impressed by the maturity in Sarah's words. You're absolutely right. He could have reacted any way he wanted, but he chose to make it a positive experience instead. That's something I'll carry with me. As the final preparations for landing were made, the crew got ready to greet the passengers and help them disembark. Sarah felt a newfound appreciation for the work she did. As flight attendants, they were often the first point of contact for passengers, the ones who set the tone for the journey. But after everything that had transpired, Sarah now saw the bigger picture. It wasn't just about serving drinks or ensuring safety. It was about creating an experience. And sometimes that experience could be life-changing. As the passengers began to leave, Sarah couldn't resist one final glance toward Keanu. He had gathered his belongings and was now standing by the exit, waiting to disembark. As he reached the door, he turned to Sarah and the rest of the crew, giving them a warm smile. Thank you again for a great flight, Keanu said, his voice sincere. I'll never forget this one. And with that, he was gone, disappearing into the crowd of travelers who were oblivious to the fact that they had just shared a flight with one of Hollywood's most beloved stars. Sarah stood there for a moment, taking it all in. The flight was over, but the lessons from it were just beginning. She felt a deep sense of gratitude for having had the opportunity to witness firsthand the power of humility and the strength of character. Keanu had reminded her, in a way she would never forget, that the true measure of a person wasn't found in their fame or accomplishments. It was in how they treated others, especially in moments of discomfort or uncertainty. As she gathered her things and prepared to leave the plane, she felt a sense of peace settle over her. She had learned something far more valuable than any in-flight training could have ever taught her. The journey wasn't just about getting from one place to another. It was about the connections you made along the way, the moments that left a lasting impression. And as she walked off the plane and into the bustling terminal, Sarah knew one thing for sure. She would never look at the world the same way again. What do you think is the most important lesson you can take away from this story? Have you ever experienced a moment that completely changed your perspective? Let us know in the comments below. If you've enjoyed this journey with us, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss another story that will make you rethink the way you see the world. The days following the flight felt like a blur. Sarah couldn't stop thinking about the experience with Keanu. Every time she thought about it, she felt a rush of emotions, embarrassment, gratitude, but most of all, a sense of awe. It wasn't every day that someone got to learn such a powerful life lesson in the most unexpected of places. For Sarah and the crew, that flight had become more than just a job. It had become a reminder of the kindness and humility that existed even in the most famous and public figures. As Sarah went about her routine in the days after the flight, she noticed a shift in herself. She found herself taking extra care with her interactions, both with her passengers and her colleagues. A simple act of kindness, a thoughtful word, these small moments felt more meaningful now. Keanu had shown her that grace wasn't just about grand gestures. It was in the way you responded to everyday moments to the people around you. And that lesson was something Sarah was determined to carry with her every day. But the story didn't end there. A week later, as Sarah was at home, after a long day of work, she received a surprising email notification. It was from the airline's headquarters, with the subject line, "A special message for Sarah from Keanu Reeves." Her heart skipped a beat as she opened it. The email began, "Dear Sarah, I hope this message finds you well. I wanted to personally thank you for your kindness and the way you handled everything during our flight last week. The crew was professional, friendly, and accommodating, and it was a pleasure to be on board with all of you. I understand how awkward the situation must have been, and I genuinely appreciate how you all kept the atmosphere light and positive. I want you to know that I hold no hard feelings, and I hope that the experience helped you reflect as it did for me. I also wanted to take a moment to let you know that you're doing something important. You have a job that can touch so many lives, and it's clear to me that you take it seriously. Keep doing what you do. You make a difference. Best regards, Keanu Reeves." Sarah stared at the email in shock. She reread it multiple times, letting the words sink in. Keanu had taken the time to personally reach out to her, to not only express his understanding, but to encourage her in her work. It was a gesture so thoughtful, so unexpected, that it left her speechless. But there was more. Attached to the email was a picture. It was a candid shot of the flight crew, all gathered in the galley during the flight. Keanu had snapped it in passing, his trademark calm smile visible in the frame. The crew was laughing, relaxed, and even in the photo you could sense the camaraderie that had grown in those few short hours. "Wow," Sarah whispered to herself as she looked at the image. It was a reminder of everything that had happened, the awkwardness, the tension, and finally, the breakthrough. It was a moment, frozen in time, something they would all look back on with fondness and pride. Sarah couldn't help but smile as she typed a quick reply. "Dear Keanu, thank you so much for your message. I can't tell you how much it means to me. Your words are something I will carry with me for a long time. You not only handled the situation with grace, but you've also given me something invaluable to reflect on. Thank you for being the person you are. I'll never forget this experience. Sincerely, Sarah." She hit send, and as the email whisked away into the digital ether, Sarah felt a sense of closure. The lesson she had learned wasn't just one she'd hold on to herself. It was something she hoped to pass on to others, to share the way kindness and humility could turn even the most awkward moments into something meaningful. The next day, as Sarah prepared for her next flight, she found herself looking at her crew members with a new sense of appreciation. She realized that every moment, every interaction, had the potential to teach something new. Keanu had been a living example of that, and it was something she hoped to embody in her own life. And so, as the plane doors closed behind her and the engines roared to life, Sarah leaned back in her seat ready for the next journey, whatever it might bring. She knew that no matter where she went, she would always carry the lessons from that flight with her. The flight had taught her more than just how to handle an awkward situation. It had taught her how to truly see people, to appreciate their humanity, and to act with kindness no matter how big or small the moment. Now we want to hear from you. Have you ever been in a situation where someone's unexpected kindness completely changed your perspective? What did you learn from it? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe. There are more stories to come, and trust us, you won't want to miss them. It had been a few months since Sarah's unforgettable flight with Keanu Reeves, but the lessons from that day still lingered with her. What had begun as an embarrassing encounter had blossomed into a life-changing experience, one that not only shifted how she saw herself, but how she saw others. Every time Sarah walked into the airport, served a passenger, or even shared a joke with her fellow flight attendants, she couldn't help but reflect on what Keanu had unknowingly taught her. Kindness, humility, and the impact one person can have on a whole room. It wasn't just Sarah who had changed. The entire crew had embraced the lesson. Greg, who had always been the first to crack a joke at someone's expense, had started being more mindful of his words. Emma, who had a knack for sensing tension in the air, began putting extra effort into lightening the mood in moments of uncertainty. Even the flight captain, who usually kept to himself, had begun initiating more casual chats with the crew before takeoff, ensuring everyone felt more connected. The ripple effect of that single flight had spread far beyond the walls of the airplane, touching the hearts and minds of the crew and even the passengers. It was as if the entire flight had been a catalyst for something much bigger, something that would continue to influence their behavior long after they landed in Los Angeles. But what Sarah found most surprising was the way she was beginning to see the passengers too. No longer did she look at her role as just serving or assisting them. It became more of an opportunity to connect, to bring a little warmth to their journey. She realized that every person who boarded the plane had a story of their own, a background, a reason for traveling. As Sarah prepared for yet another flight, she thought back to one of her favorite moments with Keanu. It had been when he had made his final thank you announcement over the intercom, telling the crew that he would remember this flight forever. At the time, Sarah had felt slightly embarrassed, thinking that it was just a polite celebrity gesture. But now she understood. He wasn't just saying it to be kind, he meant it. He wasn't focused on the grandeur of his fame, nor on the jokes that had been made at his expense. He was focused on the connection, the shared experience between them, and the humanity they all had in common. Sarah had taken that lesson to heart. It wasn't just about what happened on the plane, or even about the person involved. It was about the effect that moments like that could have, if they were approached with genuine kindness. If they were allowed to ripple out and change lives, one encounter at a time. One afternoon, as Sarah walked into the airport terminal, her phone buzzed with a new message. It was from Emma, one of her closest colleagues, and it simply read, "Hey, you're going to love this." Attached was a news article titled, "Keanu Reeves Spreads Kindness, the actor who changed a flight crew's perspective forever." Sarah's heart skipped a beat as she clicked on the link. The article was about the impact of Keanu's humble behavior that had rippled through the flight industry, especially after his calm and gracious handling of the situation with the crew on Sarah's flight. It didn't mention Sarah or the specific crew, but it described how the quiet hero had unintentionally sparked conversations about kindness, humility, and how people in the service industry, flight attendants, waiters, customer service reps, were often the ones who learned the most about grace under pressure. The article highlighted a trend in which flight attendants and airport staff had begun receiving messages from passengers who had been inspired by their positive interactions, thanks to a little extra kindness. It was surreal. What had started as a simple encounter between a celebrity and a flight crew had sparked a movement, a ripple effect that was now visible in the wider world. Sarah smiled to herself, feeling a deep sense of pride. She knew that they hadn't just been part of some random story. They had been part of something bigger, something that could change how people thought about each other. In the following weeks, Sarah would occasionally encounter a passenger who smiled at her a little brighter, or who took the time to thank her for her kindness. She realized that what Keanu had done on that flight, by simply choosing kindness over retaliation, had made a difference, not only to the crew but to everyone who heard the story. That story, in turn, had encouraged others to be more aware of how they treated others, regardless of their station in life. Whether it was a celebrity, a passenger, or a fellow crew member, Keanu had reminded them all that everyone deserved respect, everyone deserved kindness. And now, Sarah knew what it felt like to be part of something bigger than herself. As she made her way to her gate for another flight, she couldn't help but think about how small moments could snowball into something far-reaching. She was no longer just a flight attendant. She was an active participant in this ripple effect. Ripple that had started with a few small jokes and ended with a lesson in humanity that would last a lifetime. Do you think kindness can truly change the way we interact with each other? Have you ever had a moment where one small act of kindness changed your day or your life? Share your thoughts with us in the comments below. If you've enjoyed this journey, hit that subscribe button and stick with us. There are plenty more stories that will inspire and challenge you to see the world differently. Months had passed since that unforgettable flight, but for Sarah, the impact of that day still echoed through her life. Every time she reflected on the story, she marveled at how one encounter could change everything. It wasn't just the joke that had been made or the awkward tension that followed. It was what had come out of it. The way it had connected people. The way it had taught them all to see one another through a different lens. It was a lesson about grace, humility, and kindness that Sarah now carried with her wherever she went. One afternoon, while walking through the airport, Sarah noticed a group of passengers gathered near the departure gate, chatting excitedly among themselves. She recognized one of them, a man in his late 30s with a camera slung around his neck. He was talking animatedly to a woman beside him. At first, Sarah didn't think much of it, but as she walked closer, she realized the man was holding a familiar photograph, the one that Keanu had taken of the flight crew that day. Her heart skipped a beat. Curious, Sarah approached the group with a smile. "Hey, that's a great photo," she said, her voice light. The man turned to her, his eyes widening as if he had just realized he was speaking to one of the people in the picture. "Oh, wow! I didn't expect you to be here," he exclaimed. "I've been showing everyone." "This photo, it's from that viral story about Keanu Reeves, right?" Sarah nodded, her curiosity piqued. "Yeah, that was quite the experience." The woman next to him smiled and added, "I read about it online. It was such a touching story. How Keanu handled the whole situation with such grace. It really made me think about how we treat people, especially those in customer service roles. I've been trying to be a little kinder to people since then." Sarah felt a lump form in her throat. The ripple effect was real. It wasn't just the crew that had learned from Keanu's behavior. The story had reached far and wide, touching more lives than she could have ever imagined. People from all walks of life had been inspired by that moment of humility, and now they were sharing their own stories of how they had chosen to treat others with more respect, more understanding. She glanced at the photograph in the man's hands again. The image had become a symbol of something bigger, a reminder that kindness, even in the face of awkwardness, could make a lasting impact. It was humbling to think that something so simple could create such a powerful ripple. "Well, it's nice to know the story is making an impact," Sarah said, her voice full of warmth. "Keanu really did show all of us something important that day," the man nodded eagerly. "Absolutely. It really made me rethink how I interact with others. I mean, we all have our bad days, but if Keanu could handle that situation with so much dignity, why can't we do the same?" Sarah smiled, her heart swelling with pride. She was witnessing the real power of kindness in action. The lesson hadn't just been about how to handle a specific moment. It had become a movement, one that transcended a single incident. The story of Keanu's humility was now out in the world, helping people see the value in the small moments that often go unnoticed. As the passengers began to board, Sarah said her goodbyes and made her way to the cruise lounge, reflecting on the conversation she had just had. She realized something important. The lesson Keanu had taught her and the rest of the crew had come full circle. What started as an awkward situation, with jokes and tension, had led to a profound change in the way people viewed the world. It was the ripple effect she had hoped for, but there was still more to it. The most powerful part of the experience wasn't just how the world had changed around them, it was how the crew had changed. Sarah, Greg, Emma, and the rest of the team had learned to carry those lessons forward, making them a part of their everyday lives. They had become more than just flight attendants. They had become ambassadors of kindness, helping to spread the message wherever they went. And that was the true beauty of the story. It wasn't about the jokes, it wasn't about Keanu's fame, it wasn't even about the viral moments that followed. It was about how people, through their choices and actions, could create a wave of positive change that spread far beyond anything they could have imagined. As Sarah walked to the gate for her next flight, she felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She knew that she was part of something much larger than herself, something that would continue to inspire others long after this story faded from the headlines. The journey wasn't just about the destination anymore, it was about the people they met along the way, the lessons they shared and the kindness they gave. How has a moment of kindness or humility ever affected you in your life? Have you ever been part of a story that changed the way you look at the world? Share your thoughts with us in the comments below. If you've enjoyed this journey with us, hit that subscribe button Stay tuned for more stories that remind us all of the power of kindness, compassion, and human connection.